You won't believe what happened when a seemingly ordinary HOA president showed up with contractors, ready to make some improvements to a homeowner's property. What started as a routine visit quickly spiraled into a jaw-dropping showdown that no one saw coming. The homeowner, confused and caught off guard, had no idea that the HOA president had other plans that involved trespassing and an outrageous attempt to push the limits of authority. As the contractors started their work, things took a sudden turn. It wasn't just a disagreement over the property lines, it became clear that the HOA president and his team were crossing boundaries in more ways than one. What started as a minor altercation soon escalated into a situation that no one could have anticipated. When the authorities arrived, the situation went from tense to downright dramatic. By the end of it, the contractors weren't the only ones being escorted away in handcuffs. The HOA president, once in full control, found himself facing serious consequences for his actions. What drove him to this point, and how did it all unfold so quickly? Stick around to find out how this shocking encounter unraveled and the surprising twists that followed. To understand how things escalated so quickly, we need to go back a few weeks. The homeowner, who had lived peacefully in the neighborhood for years, had recently received multiple letters from the HOA. At first, it was just a few minor complaints, untrimmed bushes, a broken fence post, no big deal. But soon, the notices became more frequent and more aggressive, accusing him of violating rules that seemed to come out of nowhere. It wasn't long before the homeowner felt like the HOA was targeting him. The tension between him and the HOA president, a man known for being especially strict and relentless, had been building for months. Rumor had it that the president took his role a little too seriously, going as far as making random visits to homes under his control, looking for reasons to fine people. His power trip was becoming more and more obvious, and the homeowner was starting to push back. Then, one morning, out of nowhere, the HOA president showed up with a team of contractors. The homeowner had no idea why they were there, and the president was strangely vague when asked. As they began walking around the property, the homeowner realized something wasn't right. Why were these contractors on his lawn without any prior notice? Why was the president acting so confident? It was as if he thought he had complete authority, but what happened next left everyone in shock. As the contractors began measuring and marking areas of the property, the homeowner felt a knot form in his stomach. It was one thing to receive vague letters from the HOA, but it was another to have people show up unannounced, carrying equipment and acting like they had every right to be there. He tried to approach the president, asking what was going on, but the HOA president simply waved him off with a dismissive, "This is for the community's benefit. Trust me." But the homeowner wasn't having it. He had spent weeks researching his rights and knew that no one, not even the HOA president, could just show up and make changes to his property without proper authorization. He asked to see paperwork or any kind of official notice that gave the HOA permission to carry out work on his land. The president hesitated for a moment, then pulled out a piece of paper that looked oddly hastily scribbled and not very official. Something felt off. The more the homeowner pressed for details, the more the president became defensive, his tone sharp and impatient. The contractors seemed equally uncomfortable, but didn't question their orders. It was clear they were only there to do a job, but there was a growing sense of unease in the air. The tension between the homeowner and the president reached a boiling point when the president finally snapped, "You can't fight this. It's already decided." At that moment, the homeowner made a decision. He grabbed his phone and called the police. What he didn't expect was the shocking turn of events that would follow once law enforcement arrived. As the homeowner waited for the police to arrive, he watched the contractors continue their work, clearly uneasy but unwilling to stop. The HOA president seemed to sense that something was off, but didn't back down. He stood tall, as if daring the homeowner to challenge him. The air between them was thick with tension, like something was about to snap. Every word the president spoke felt like a threat, every movement a power play. The homeowner's pulse quickened as he wondered if this was really happening. Was the HOA president actually trying to push him off his own property? Minutes felt like hours. When the police finally pulled up, the atmosphere grew even more charged. The officers, unfamiliar with the situation, approached cautiously. The homeowner explained the situation quickly, describing how the HOA president had come with contractors, claiming authority over his land without any official notice. As he spoke, the president seemed to grow increasingly defensive, his confidence now laced with frustration. He tried to explain to the officers that everything was above board, that it was just routine maintenance for the neighborhood. But the more the officers listened to the homeowner's side, the less convincing the president seemed. A tense silence followed. The officers asked the president to step aside and began questioning the contractors. That's when things took a dramatic turn. One of the contractors, who had remained silent up until now, suddenly spoke up. "We didn't know it was unauthorized," he admitted, his voice shaking. "We thought we had permission to be here." The confession sent a shockwave through the scene. What was really going on here? Was the HOA president hiding something even bigger? The homeowner's heart raced as he realized this story was far from over, and the truth might be darker than he had ever imagined. As the contractor's unexpected confession hung in the air, a new layer of tension formed. The homeowner's mind raced, trying to piece together what was really happening. It was one thing for the HOA president to act like he was in control, but the fact that the contractors seemed completely in the dark about the legitimacy of the job raised an alarming question. Had the HOA president lied to them as well? But before anyone could fully process what had just been said, a second, far more startling development occurred. A car pulled up at the edge of the driveway, and out stepped a woman in a sharp business suit. She walked with purpose, her eyes scanning the scene. The officers, momentarily distracted, turned to face her as she introduced herself as the legal representative of the HOA. The homeowner's stomach churned. He had no idea who she was, but the sudden appearance of someone with authority felt like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. The woman barely acknowledged the homeowner's presence as she approached the HOA president, speaking in low, hurried tones. The officers noticed the exchange, their curiosity piqued. Then, just as quickly as she had arrived, the woman turned toward the officers with a chillingly calm smile. "There seems to be some confusion here," she said, her voice smooth and confident. "The work being done is part of an ongoing investigation into property violations in this neighborhood. We have full legal clearance for these actions." The homeowner froze, his blood running cold. What investigation? What violations? It was all starting to feel like a web of lies and manipulation, and he had no idea how deep it went. Had the HOA been planning something more sinister all along? And what could they possibly gain from bulldozing through his property like this? The truth seemed more elusive than ever. The homeowner's heart pounded as the woman from the HOA stepped forward, her words hanging in the air like a trap. The idea that this was all part of some investigation made his blood run cold. But the officers were now fully engaged, and they began asking questions with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. "What investigation are you referring to? Who authorized this?" one officer demanded. The woman's confidence faltered for just a second, a crack in her carefully constructed facade. "I'm not at liberty to share all the details," she replied quickly. But the officer wasn't letting up. "If you have legal clearance, we need to see that paperwork. And if you don't, you're trespassing." It was then that the HOA president, who had been silent for far too long, suddenly snapped. "This isn't how this was supposed to go," he yelled, his face red with anger. His voice cracked as he gestured at the contractors. "We were just following orders." But just as the situation seemed like it was spiraling into chaos, something unexpected happened. The contractor who had confessed earlier, his hands trembling, stepped forward again. "Wait," he said, his voice quieter now. "There's more to this." The man looked directly at the homeowner, his eyes wide with regret. "The HOA president, he wasn't just using us for this job. He promised us a cut from the sale of your property if we could force you to sell. We had no idea we were being used like this." The homeowner stayed in shock. It wasn't just a simple case of overzealous authority. The HOA president had been plotting something far more sinister, an illegal scheme to pressure homeowners into selling their properties for personal gain. It had all been a ruse, a fake investigation to get the homeowner to cave. Before anyone could fully process the confession, the police quickly moved in, placing the HOA president and the contractors under arrest. As the officers read them their rights, the woman from the HOA's legal team disappeared into her car without a word, leaving behind more questions than answers. What had she been a part of? What else was going on behind the scenes? The homeowner was left standing on his property, stunned but relieved, with the knowledge that the real fight was just beginning. The web of deceit that HOA had spun was deeper than anyone had imagined, and now they were about to uncover every single piece of it. As the police led the HOA president and the contractors away in handcuffs, the homeowner couldn't help but feel a mixture of disbelief and relief. He had just witnessed an elaborate scheme unravel before his eyes, one that had been carefully hidden behind official-sounding letters and false promises. The officers took down all the details, and it was clear that the president's illegal activities extended far beyond just this one instance. The investigation into his actions would be thorough, and the contractors, now cooperating, would testify to the extent of the fraud. In the weeks that followed, the homeowner learned that the HOA president had been running a racket, pressuring multiple residents to sell their properties at below-market prices, all while using the guise of community improvements. The woman who had appeared on the scene turned out to be a part of his inner circle, but her involvement was still unclear. Authorities were now looking into her role in the scheme. The homeowner's fight wasn't over. There were still legal battles ahead. But for the first time in months, he felt a sense of justice. The HOA's grip on the neighborhood was broken, and he knew that standing up for his rights had made a real difference. As for the rest of the residents, they now have a new sense of hope that they could reclaim control over their homes and their lives.